All right, guys, welcome back to Chapter 8. So I'm going to start us off in the video by reading through the questions that you will have to answer for Chapter 8. So the first question says, what misfortune does Charlotte encounter? Now the word misfortune kind of is like a synonym for bad luck. So what kind of bad luck does Charlotte encounter? The second question says, why does the doctor agree to keep her secret? And number 3 says, how does Charlotte prove herself to James? So I'm interested to see what's to come in this chapter. All right, guys, here we go, Chapter 8. Two stock tenders held a nervous horse by the ropes and tied the brittle cheek straps. Ebenezer had been right. Many of the horses were feral and had never been broken, and that made it even harder to shod. Charlotte got into position and pulled up the back hoof. The horse reared. The last thing Charlotte remembered was a hoof coming toward her face, and the pain. She woke up in the doctor's office and tried to sit up, but reeled from a headache. Her stomach churned, and she retched. Charlotte reached up and felt her eye. It was swollen shut and scraped and bloody. She tried to open it, but the lid would only lift part way. What happened? Charlotte asked. She nervously checked to see that she was fully dressed. It's best to lie still, said the doctor. You were kicked in the face by a wild horse. Mr. Birch brought you in and waited for some time. I assured him that I would take good care of you, but that I needed to keep you overnight. I'm afraid that you might lose sight in your eye. What's a girl trying to shoe a horse for? What? Charlotte said. You're dressed like a young man, but those hands are calloused like a ranch hand. But I'm a doctor, and I know a girl when I see one. He stared at Charlotte. I need my job, said Charlotte, and I couldn't work for anybody if Mr. Birch knew. You don't need to give me a long, drawn-out explanation. You're not the first woman to pretend being a man that I've ever treated. I'm not going to tell anyone, including Mr. Birch. Now, don't move a minute. I'm going to put on this ointment. Charlotte flinched as the doctor dabbed on the foul-smelling medicine. I've got one lady out past town whose husband's been gone to the gold mines for 2 years, and nobody thinks that he's gone. She's been pretending to be him all this time. Saved her from many a problem. Had another patient some years ago whose husband was killed by bandits, but she dressed in his clothes for several years to protect herself and her children in the wilderness. Held off a few raids, and everyone thought it was him. When her sons got old enough, she changed back and told everyone the true story. Don't you worry about me. What about my eye? Asked Charlotte. When the swelling and bruising goes down, we'll know more, but it'll be cockeyed at least. And like I said, you might be blind. How soon can I drive again? Asked Charlotte. You won't be driving any time soon, said the doctor, and I don't know anyone who would hire a driver with only one good eye. Charlotte felt sick again. She didn't know if it was from the pain or if it was her bad luck. She hadn't even driven a single stage run in California, and now she couldn't see out of one eye. How should she work? How would she get enough money to buy property? She wished Ebenezer was here, or Hayward, but they were 1,000 miles away. She lay back down on the doctor's table, and the room swirled around her. She reached again. The next day, Charlotte waited on the bench in the doctor's office for James to come and get her. She couldn't see a thing out of her left eye. She looked at the black patch she held in her hand, but the doctor said that it couldn't be worn until her eye healed. People walking by were alarmed when they saw her. Some stared, and they turned away, except for the children who just plain stared. Others stopped and asked questions like it was their business. Charlotte slumped over and kept her head down. She had spent years trying to blend in and not be noticed, and now everyone was walking by examining her face. She felt self-conscious and embarrassed. One of the little children started crying when they saw her. She felt like a monster. Finally, James pulled up a wagon. Charlie, you look like you wrestled a bull and a bull won, he said. Come on now, let's get you back to the stable. Riding back, Charlotte only had one thing on her mind. James, how soon till I can drive? Frank and I already discussed it. You can't drive with only one good eye. We can't take our chance, not with our business so good and our name's at stake. But you can stock tender for us as long as you like. That's the best that we can do. After Charlotte got back to the stables, she shut the door in her small room and she laid down on her bunk. Silent tears strung from the cuts and scrapes on her eye and blurred the other. How am I going to get where I'm going if I can't see? She thought. The crying made her bad eye swell even more. But just like that day at the orphanage when Hayward left, once she started, she couldn't stop until every tear was given away. And don't forget that in the beginning of the story, it told us that Charlotte doesn't ever cry. With the eye patch, Charlotte looked a little like a pirate, and folks around the library started calling her One-Eyed Charlie. She didn't mind because people accepted the eye patch much easier than they did a crooked, deformed eye. What she did mind was not being able to drive. As much as she tried to be grateful for her job, her heart wasn't in it. She ached to get out and ride on the countryside. She had learned to love the freedom of driving as much as her animals. The feeling of being in charge, of folks trusting that she knew the way, and of knowing her team. When she drove, her horses seemed almost to know what would be expected of them without a word being spoken. Sometimes it seemed like magic. After a month, Charlotte was itching to sit in the box seat, and since the stock tenders didn't make nearly as much as stage drivers, she missed the money too. One moonlit night, Charlotte walked around the back of the stables and caught her reflection in a barrel of water. She looked at herself. She lifted the eye patch. Her left eye was crooked and twisted. Her face had weathered. Her hair was straight and too long, like most ranch hands, and she pulled it back and tied it in a tail. It was knotted mess from being under a hat. She smothered her cheeks in her hands and hardly recognizing herself. She remembered another night long ago when she had looked at herself in a pool of water. What had she wanted back then? She had wanted to be out of the kitchen and riding horses. She had wanted to find Hayward again someday and to have a ranch of her own. She'd been stubborn enough to think that somehow she could do it all. Now her dreams were slipping away, and it frightened her to clear it to the bone. Riding coaches was the only reason that she had come to California, and it was the only way that she was going to make it here. She took out her kerchief and dipped it in the corner in water and wiped her face. What had Vern told her? That she had to do what her heart tells her. The only way to get my ranch is to keep riding and driving horses, she whispered to herself, and that's what I aim to do. The next afternoon, while Frank and James were in town for their daily bank run, she took a 6-horse team out on her own. She had to see if she could still drive. The straight parts weren't bad. The horses knew the road. Charlotte held the reins and gave tugs, but veering to the left was the problem because she couldn't see much to the left. She ran the coach off the road and up an embankment. It was a struggle to get the horses out of the soft dirt and back on the road. Now I'll know what not to do next time, she said to the horses. The next day she overturned the coach completely, but was able to jump free. What was she doing? She knew how to drive a team. She didn't need training with the horses or the ribbons. She knew those things by heart. It was her eye that she didn't know. She needed to train her good eye. She needed to learn how to use it all over again. She started taking a smaller team out every day. First a 2-horse team, then 4, and finally with 6 in hand. Charlotte had been proving herself her whole life, and she wasn't about to stop now. She didn't even care if Frank and James caught on to what she was doing. And I'm going to stop before I turn the page because there is a picture here of Charlotte looking in the water where it just spoke on the last page about her not recognizing herself. They might as well see me trying, she thought. She learned the different sounds of the horses' hooves that made on different types of roads. If the road was hard, the hooves made a hollow clopping sound. If the road was soft, the hooves made a dull thudding sound. She relied on her one good eye to take over for the other. She trusted her senses and the 6th sense she had for handling horses. You don't really have 6 senses, guys. We have 5 senses. So that was kind of a joke. Charlotte dove back and forth over the route and memorized every rock and tree. She set a goal for herself. If she made 10 clean round-trip runs, she knew she was as good as the next driver. After that, she'd have Frank and James to convince. After the 10th clean run, Charlotte went to James. I want to drive the stage run over the river. Now, Charlie, we've already been over all that. Me and Frank think that you ride with me, and if you think I'm not fit, then I won't bother you again, said Charlotte. What will the passengers say about your eye patch, said James. Just tell them that it's to frighten off bandits. They won't know any different. I don't know, Charlotte defended herself. You know my reputation. I traveled all this way riding coaches is the whole reason I came to California. And I came because you asked me. You know I've been practicing. Go by my past driving. That's all I'm asking, and I wouldn't be asking if I didn't know I could drive. Reluctantly, James said, the first time that you can't handle the situation, I'm taking the reins. I'll tell you if I need help. Don't go stepping unless I ask. Fair enough, said James. Tomorrow? Tomorrow, if the weather holds. I ain't going to be a fair weather driver, said Charlotte. I want to drive same as usual, like all the other drivers. Well, I guess you deserve that much. Tomorrow, rain or shine. It was one of those storms where the rain came down in wash tubs, but the stage was scheduled to go. The coach was chock full of passengers, baggage, and mail pouches that it had to get through. Charlotte was soaked clear by the time the baggage was secured. James rode shotgun next to her. The wind wouldn't let up, and the rain came flying over in every which direction. James seemed nervous. Charlie, I can't even see the roads, he yelled. And then it's a good thing I'm driving, 'cause I smell it and I can hear it, said Charlotte. James sat back to the coach and tended to the storm. The mud was so thick that it reached the hubs, but Charlotte still found the road. When they reached the river, it had swelled almost to the bridge supporters. Charlotte stopped the stage on the north bank. Stay inside, she told the passengers. I'm checking the bridge. Charlotte took off her gloves and carefully walked the swaying timbers to see if the bridge was worthy. She stomped a few times and listened to the moans of the wood. She felt the swollen planks and pulled on the guard ropes until she was satisfied. She walked back to the stage and told the passengers to get out. Ain't no reason to risk your lives, said Charlotte. James, I'm gonna walk you and these fine people over to the other side to wait for me. But a portly man refused to budge. I'll take my chances inside the coach, he said. Not my coach, said Charlotte. I'm familiar with adventure, young man, he argued. The bridge can't take any extra weight, and I'm not about to lose my first passenger to that river. Now step out or I'll help you out. Still grumbling, the man reluctantly climbed down. In the blinding rain, Charlotte escorted a group, a few at a time, across the bridge. When they were safely settled on the other side, she walked back to the stage. She got back to the box. Thunder growled nearby, and she knew what was coming next. She held on tight to the ribbons, and she waited for the lightning. It hit within a mile, but she kept the horses reined. Trusting her instincts, she hitched the horses and the stage across the bridge, but the timbers groaned and the iron capped. Wheels clackled across the wooden planks. Ahead, the passengers hurtled together and watched anxiously from the other side. The river raced in a few feet beneath the wheels. The bridge rocked and the horses reared and whined. The coach was smack in the middle of the bridge. Charlotte kept her sights on the far bank. She heard the splintering and the cracking of the weather wood, and that meant that the bridge was coming apart. Tree limbs swayed in the wind, and the sounds of the storms brought back memory somewhere deep in Charlotte's mind. A jumble of frantic images and words, being held in someone's lap, and voices. Stop! Hold on! Her parents' voices in her face. Yes, her mother's face close to her. Keep 'em straight. Keep 'em straight. That's what she had to do. She stood up in the box. Keep 'em straight on the bridge, Charlotte, dashing over the water from her good eye and gathering her reins in her firm grip. She cracked her whip and she yelled away. She was thrown back into the box and the horses jibed side to side, but she held tight to the ribbons. They flew across like scared jackrabbits. I gotta stop, y'all, because the next video is about to be time ended. I'll see you next.